Picture this. You're standing at the entrance of a grand, exclusive gala. The type of event that you only see in movies: marble floors, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and the gentle hum of rich conversations filling the air. The invitation list is a who's who of the city's elite, and as you glance around, you feel completely out of place. You weren't supposed to be here, not in this dazzling room, surrounded by the wealthiest people in town. But here you are. You've managed to slip past security, dodge the prying eyes of the staff, and now, you're in, but for how long? The question running through your mind isn't just how to stay hidden, it's why you're here. What's going to happen next? Because, as you soon find out, what happens next will change everything. Hi, I'm so glad you're here because what you're about to hear will keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, I know you're probably asking yourself, why should I care? What makes this story different from all the others I've seen before? Well, that's exactly why you need to stick around. You won't be able to guess where this is headed, trust me. You're going to get the answer to something that might have crossed your mind at some point in your life. What if you took a risk and just snuck in? We've all been tempted by that curiosity, by the allure of something off-limits, something that could shake up our dull routines. But would you dare to take the plunge? To go somewhere you don't belong, knowing full well the risks, but also knowing that the reward could be something incredible? Let's rewind just a little. Imagine being at the kind of event where the people around you are so polished, so perfect, that they seem almost unreal. The way they carry themselves, the way they speak, the way they look. It's like they came straight from a glossy magazine, and you, well, you're just an outsider. You never thought you'd be here, but somehow, you've pulled it off. It feels almost too easy. The thrill of doing something you're not supposed to, the heart-pounding excitement mixed with a little fear. It's intoxicating, right? The thrill of the unknown. But the real question is, why did she do it? Why did she sneak into this high-end gala in the first place? You might be wondering if she had a plan, or if it was all just spur of the moment. Maybe she was looking for an opportunity to meet someone important, or perhaps she had a hidden agenda. But here's the kicker: when the host, a person you never expect to notice someone like her, asks her to dance, everything changes. How did that even happen? Why her? What did he see in her? You're about to find out, but trust me, you'll want to know every detail of how this unexpected moment unfolded. Now, I want you to really imagine this moment, standing in the middle of a room full of the city's most influential people, feeling like an absolute fish out of water, trying to blend in, not knowing what to do next. The lights glisten above, the music fills the air, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the host himself walks up to her. Everyone around her is whispering, looking on, their eyes wide with surprise. She had been just another face in the crowd, someone who shouldn't even be here, someone who didn't belong. But now, she's the center of attention. It's the last thing anyone expected. But as they say, the most unexpected things are often the most memorable. The host, impeccably dressed, looks at her with curiosity in his eyes. And before anyone can react, he extends his hand, inviting her to dance. What happens next? Did she accept? Did she say yes? Or was she too shocked to respond? And what did it mean that he chose her, out of all the guests in the room? That's where the story begins to unfold and where everything takes an unexpected turn. Here's where I need you to pay close attention because, while the rest of the guests are still processing what just happened, you're about to witness something that you could never have imagined. You might think you know where this is headed, but trust me, you don't. This isn't just about sneaking into a fancy event or dancing with a mysterious host. No, this is about finding out just how far someone is willing to go when they are faced with a life-changing opportunity, one that could lead to something more than anyone could have expected. So, stick with me here because the next part of the story is going to leave you questioning everything. But before I continue, I want you to do something for me. Picture yourself in her shoes. What would you do if you were faced with an invitation to dance from someone who could change the course of your life? Do you take the chance, or do you walk away? The stakes are high, the risk is enormous. So, let's dive into the next part of this tale. Trust me, this is one story you won't want to miss, and I promise you, the answer you've been waiting for is just around the corner. What happened next at this gala isn't just a story of chance, but a series of events that will keep you guessing. There's more to this than just sneaking in and dancing. It's a question of destiny, decisions, and the unexpected paths life can take. Want to know what happens? Keep watching, because the twist is just getting started. And trust me, you won't see this one coming. As the music swirled around her, blending with the murmurs of intrigued onlookers, she felt a rush of adrenaline that she hadn't anticipated. She hadn't planned to be here, at least not like this. There was no grand scheme or detailed strategy that led her to sneak into this extravagant gala. It had all started with a simple, unassuming invitation, but the invitation wasn't hers. It was meant for someone else entirely. The name on the RSVP card was different. But when she found it left behind, a forgotten slip of paper on a subway seat, she couldn't resist. It wasn't just the allure of the event that drew her in, but the faint hope that, for once, she could be someone else. She could pretend. She could vanish into the crowd and experience a world she'd only ever dreamed about. Her name was Emily, but tonight, she wasn't anyone special. She wasn't the daughter of the struggling artist in a cramped apartment or the overworked assistant at a law firm. No, tonight, she was someone who belonged. She was a socialite, a woman with confidence and grace, walking through a gilded world where the air felt lighter, the people smoother, and the possibilities endless. But her arrival at the gala wasn't without its risks. She'd barely gotten past the check-in desk before the receptionist had given her a second glance, his eyes scanning her outfit. There was a quick exchange, a forced smile, and somehow, she made it through. No one had stopped her. No one had questioned her. Maybe it was because she looked the part, or maybe because the event was so chaotic that no one took the time to really look closely. But the truth was, Emily was in a state of constant unease. As the evening wore on, the euphoria that had initially filled her veins began to dull. What was she doing here? Why had she pushed her luck this far? Of course, no one would have guessed she didn't belong. Her black dress was elegant enough, her hair styled to perfection, and the makeup subtle but just enough to catch the light. She had become a master of blending in over the years, always knowing when to fade into the background, when to speak up, when to stay silent. She wasn't the type to draw attention, not unless she had a reason. Yet here she was, at the center of attention for a reason she hadn't planned for, and it felt like everything was about to unravel. And then, out of nowhere, the host, tall, charismatic, his face always lit with an air of controlled charm, had extended his hand toward her. There had been a moment of hesitation. She had looked around, waiting for someone else to step forward, to claim the invitation to dance, but no one did. They were all watching, waiting for her to make the move. The atmosphere had thickened, tension rising in the air like a tide. The host's gaze was intense, almost as if he could see through her disguise. Was he aware of her intrusion? Was this a game to him? Or was there something else in play, something deeper? The host's name was Richard Montgomery, heir to a multi-million-dollar fortune, an enigma wrapped in tailored suits and power. People whispered about him in circles, not always kindly, but always with respect. Some said he had a knack for picking out the most interesting people in the room. Others, though, had a different take. Some said he was ruthless, a man who got what he wanted and left nothing behind. There were rumors that Richard didn't just mingle with the elite because of his status, but because he wanted to manipulate them. His motives were always shrouded in mystery, and his charm, while magnetic, never seemed to reach his eyes. To him, people were tools to be used, discarded, or even nurtured, depending on his mood. Yet, when Emily locked eyes with him, she didn't see any of that. What she saw was a man who was far more dangerous than anyone realized. And that was when the uncertainty hit her. Was she just another pawn in his game, or was this something more personal? Could it be that he had noticed something about her? Something that no one else had seen? It was almost as if he had been waiting for her, though she could never quite shake off the feeling that she was playing into his hands. But if Richard Montgomery was the only one she had to worry about, it would be simple. There were other players at the event, people who, for reasons Emily couldn't yet grasp, had their eyes on her as well. There was Veronica, a sharp, calculating woman known for her business acumen and her ability to charm her way into any circle. She was the type of person who could make you feel like you were the most important person in the room, and Emily had noticed her eyeing her from the moment she entered. Was Veronica just sizing her up, Or was there something else brewing beneath the surface? Emily wasn't sure, but she knew that people like Veronica rarely made friends without expecting something in return. Then there was Leo, an ambitious journalist with a reputation for getting the scoop on any story, no matter the cost. He was an enigma in his own right, with a keen sense of curiosity and a knack for sniffing out secrets. Emily had seen him before, on the outskirts of the crowd, his camera always poised, his eyes flicking over her just a little too intently. Was he just doing his job, or was there something about her he was trying to uncover? Was he aware of the story she was writing, the one that wasn't supposed to exist, the one that was unfolding in real time? The more Emily tried to settle into the gala, the more it became apparent that this wasn't just a glamorous evening. There were hidden agendas here. The people at this event, the ones she'd once dreamed of being a part of, weren't as perfect as they appeared. Everyone seemed to be playing some sort of game, a game that Emily didn't quite understand yet, but she was about to be thrust deeper into. As Richard led her to the dance floor, the swirling tension only grew. Was he going to reveal something? Would the truth finally come out? Or was this just the beginning of a much larger, more dangerous game? One thing was certain, she had walked into a web of intrigue that she couldn't simply walk away from. And then, as they began to move to the rhythm of the music, Emily caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye, a shadow, a figure standing near the back door, watching them with cold intensity. Her heart skipped a beat. Who was that? Why did they look so familiar? The feeling of being watched returned in full force, and she realized maybe the real question wasn't how she had snuck into the gala. Maybe the question was, who had been watching her all along? As the dance continued, Emily's mind raced, the elegant music swirling around her but failing to drown out the unease that gnawed at her gut. There was something off about this entire situation, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The way Richard moved, the way his hand rested on her waist, too casual, too calculated, made her skin crawl. But she had no choice but to play along, to stay in the moment. She wasn't sure if she was being paranoid or if something truly sinister was unfolding, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. It wasn't just the guests who were watching, it was Richard too, like he knew something about her, something no one else could see. And then, in the middle of the dance, as they glided across the floor, she felt a slight tug in her pocket. She had almost forgotten about the small notebook she'd slipped inside earlier that evening, a journal she had brought to jot down any observations, any oddities she might stumble upon. The journal had felt like a lifeline, her way of holding on to the little bit of control she had over this surreal situation. But as she slipped a hand into her pocket to feel for it, her breath hitched. It was gone. Just gone. Her heart skipped, panic creeping in as she shifted on her feet, trying to maintain her composure. She quickly scanned the room, hoping for any sign of it, but nothing. No sign of the notebook, no indication that it had ever been there. Was it possible someone had taken it? She had been so careful, so discreet when she had written in it earlier. She hadn't been careless with it. She was sure of it. Her mind immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. Someone had noticed her scribbling down notes, had seen her acting strange, and decided to make sure she couldn't keep track of anything. But who? And why now? Was it someone in the room with her, or was there someone else pulling the strings behind the scenes? The dance felt endless now, Richard's eyes never leaving hers, a slight smile playing on his lips as he led her across the floor. Every second stretched longer than the last. She tried to mask the rising panic, but her heart was pounding in her chest. She had to figure out what was going on. She couldn't let this slip through her fingers. And then, as if on cue, just as the dance was winding down, Richard leaned in, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're in over your head, Emily," he said softly, his words carrying an undercurrent of something almost threatening. Her heart jolted at the sound of her name. He knew. He knew who she was. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, trying to keep the fear from betraying her. He simply smirked, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite read. "Everything has consequences. Some of them are worse than others." The words hung in the air between them like a dare, a challenge. Emily wanted to press him for answers, to demand he tell her exactly what he meant, but before she could react, a sudden commotion at the far side of the room drew her attention. A loud crash, followed by a series of hurried footsteps. The crowd, distracted, began to murmur among themselves. Richard didn't flinch, he remained calm, his smile still intact, like nothing had happened. But Emily's instincts kicked in, and she knew something was very wrong. She excused herself, stepping away from the dance floor. She needed to find her notebook. Whoever had taken it, whoever had been watching her, they were closing in. She wasn't just some guest at a fancy gala anymore, she was a target, and the truth she had been searching for was slipping through her fingers. She made her way toward the back of the room, towards the exit where she had seen the figure earlier, hoping for some sign of where her notebook had gone. As she rounded the corner, she froze. There, just a few feet ahead, was a familiar face, Leo, the journalist. He was standing near the back door, his camera in hand, but his gaze was fixed on something she couldn't see. She hesitated for a moment, debating whether to approach him or slip away unnoticed. But then he turned, and their eyes locked. For a brief moment, she saw a flash of recognition in his expression, followed by something else, something colder, almost calculating. Emily didn't trust him, not after the way he had been watching her earlier, but now she had no choice. She needed to know what he was doing here, why he seemed so interested in her. "Leo," she said, her voice steady but guarded, as she stepped closer. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer right away, his eyes flicking toward the door, then back to her. There was a moment of tension before he finally spoke, his voice low. "You shouldn't be looking for answers," he said, almost as if warning her. "Some questions, they're better left unanswered." Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean?" she pressed, trying to get him to reveal something, anything. But Leo just shook his head, his lips curling into a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Trust me," he said. "You don't want to know the truth." Before she could respond, he turned, moving quickly toward the back door, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Emily stood frozen for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Why was he so intent on keeping her in the dark? What was he hiding? And why had he warned her not to dig deeper? The questions swirled in her mind as she turned back to the main room, her stomach sinking. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed a line. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous this situation became. As she walked back toward the ballroom, her eyes scanning the crowd, something caught her attention in the corner of the room. A figure, the same one she had seen earlier, watching from the shadows. But this time, they weren't standing still. The figure was moving toward the exit, disappearing into the crowd. Emily's heart skipped. There was something about the way they moved, something familiar. She knew that walk. She had seen it before. But who was it? And why were they trying to slip away unnoticed? Suddenly, everything felt like a trap. She wasn't just a part of the story anymore, she was in the middle of it. And the more she tried to uncover the truth, the more the pieces slipped away. The deeper she went, the more dangerous things became. And the scariest part was, she wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Who was a friend? Who was an enemy? And, most importantly, who was pulling the strings behind it all? Just then, Emily noticed something else, a glimmer of light on the floor, something reflective catching her eye. As she bent down to pick it up, her breath caught in her throat. It was a small, silver key. Where had it come from? What was it for? And why was it lying here, hidden in plain sight? The answers were slipping away faster than she could catch them. The deeper she went, the darker this story seemed to get. But one thing was clear, whoever was behind this had made sure she couldn't turn back now. And the worst part? She was just getting started. As Emily stood there, her fingers tightly gripping the small silver key, the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The key was cold in her hand, but the implications of what it could mean made her heart race. What was it for? Why was it here, of all places? She had no answers, no clear direction to go in, but one thing was painfully obvious: someone was trying to manipulate her. They were watching her every move, making sure she couldn't dig too deep. Whoever was behind this had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, leaving her with more questions than answers. But that key, that tiny, innocuous object, felt like the beginning of something she didn't fully understand yet, something that could turn everything upside down. But just as she turned to slip the key into her pocket and begin her search for answers, she heard a voice. A voice she hadn't expected to hear. It was soft, barely a whisper, but it was unmistakable. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing at the edge of the hallway, was her older brother, Alex. He looked different, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with a tense, almost worried expression. "Emily," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk." She froze, her mind racing. Alex was never one for secrecy, and the last time she had seen him, everything had seemed fine. But now, there was something off in the way he looked at her, something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. Alex had always been protective, but this wasn't just concern. It felt like fear. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice low, her mind still grappling with the sudden appearance of the key and everything that had been unfolding so far. Alex glanced around, making sure no one was nearby before stepping closer. "I didn't want to tell you this," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think you're in over your head. You don't know who you're dealing with." His words were cryptic, and they only added to the swirl of confusion and tension that had enveloped Emily ever since she set foot in this lavish gala. "You have to stop digging, Em. You have to get out of here, right now." Emily's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about? What do you know?" She needed answers, and she wasn't about to back down now. The key, the mysterious figures, the cryptic warnings, everything was building to something, and she had to know what it was. Alex's eyes flickered with something she couldn't place, guilt, perhaps, or maybe a hint of fear, before he shook his head. "I can't explain everything right now. Just trust me. There are things about this place, about Richard Montgomery, that you don't understand. People like him, they don't let things go. And I'm telling you, whatever you think you've figured out, it's not the truth. You have no idea what's really going on here." Emily took a step back, her mind racing with questions. Alex had always been a straight shooter, never one to play games, but something in his voice, the way he kept glancing over his shoulder like he was worried someone might be watching, made her doubt his intentions. Why hadn't he told her sooner? And why, now, was he so desperate to get her to stop? "You're not making sense, Alex," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not leaving until I find out what's really going on." His face hardened, his jaw clenching. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone firm, almost like a command. "This isn't just about you. There are people involved in this, people you don't want to mess with. They'll stop at nothing to make sure you don't get any closer to the truth." Before Emily could respond, the sound of a door creaking open behind her caught her attention. She whipped around, her heart skipping a beat. From the shadows emerged a figure she hadn't expected to see, and the sight of them froze her in place. It was Veronica, the woman who had been eyeing her ever since she arrived. She was leaning casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching them with an almost amused expression. "I told you," Veronica said, her voice dripping with something darkly knowing. "Didn't I? People like Richard Montgomery don't take kindly to snooping around. And neither do his friends." Emily's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice sharp with the weight of everything she was still trying to piece together. Veronica didn't answer right away. Instead, she pushed herself off the doorframe, strolling toward Emily with an unsettling calmness. "You really think you can walk into their world and just find answers? You don't know the half of it, do you?" Veronica's smile was faint, almost mocking, and her eyes glinted with something that wasn't entirely friendly. "This isn't a game, sweetheart. It's much bigger than you think. There's a reason Richard chose you tonight. A reason why you were invited in, why they let you slip by unnoticed. And trust me, you're going to wish you had stayed far, far away from this mess." Emily's thoughts were racing. Everything was spiraling out of control. Alex's warning, Veronica's cryptic statement, and the constant tug of the key in her pocket, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle that she wasn't ready to solve, but that everyone else was determined to force her into. She looked between the two of them, both now standing too close for comfort, their eyes locked on her as if waiting for her to crack. The pressure was suffocating. "I don't care about any of this," Emily said, her voice shaking slightly but determined. "I'm not leaving. Not until I understand what's really happening. So if you both want to stop me, you're going to have to try a little harder." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, without a word, Alex turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as though he hadn't just tried to warn her about something dangerous. Veronica, however, didn't leave. She took a step closer, her face now inches from Emily's, her eyes intense. "You're in this deeper than you realize," she whispered, her breath cold against Emily's ear. "And the more you dig, the more you'll regret it. But by then, it'll be too late." The warning hung in the air like a shadow, thick and suffocating. And just like that, the pieces of the puzzle grew more complicated, the stakes higher than ever. Emily could feel it in her bones, the walls were closing in on her, and every step she took to uncover the truth only seemed to pull her deeper into a labyrinth she couldn't escape. The key in her pocket now felt heavier than ever, its purpose unclear but undeniably important. What had she really stumbled into? Who was playing who? And why had Richard Montgomery taken such an interest in her? She didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain: this was far from over, and she had no idea who she could trust anymore. As she turned to leave the hallway, her thoughts were interrupted by a loud noise coming from the far side of the ballroom. A crash, followed by a series of hurried voices, signaling something or someone that was about to break the delicate tension of the evening wide open. Was she about to find the answers she was looking for, or was this just another game that would end with more questions than before? The night seemed to stretch on forever, the buzz of conversations, clinking glasses, and soft music now nothing more than background noise. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that she was being watched. It wasn't just the warning from Veronica, nor the cryptic words of her brother, Alex. No, something deeper was gnawing at her, a raw, unsettling intuition that had settled in her gut. She could feel it in the air, like a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. Her mind raced with fragments of information, bits and pieces that didn't fit together no matter how hard she tried to make sense of them. The key in her pocket felt like an anchor now, heavy and foreboding. But there was more: the sudden tension between her and the people who should have been closest to her, like Alex, who had never been this cryptic or distant before. Veronica, with her calm but eerie warnings, had only deepened the sense that Emily was a pawn in a game much bigger than she had anticipated. It wasn't just the gala anymore, it was something darker, something far more dangerous. But the most chilling thought crept into her mind as she glanced around the room once again: she wasn't alone. The moment she stepped away from the ballroom to catch her breath, the uneasy feeling intensified. The hallway was dim, only a few scattered lights casting long, sinister shadows on the walls. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but her heart kept pounding in her chest, the sound deafening in the silence. Every step echoed too loudly, as if someone was right behind her, following her, watching her every move. She turned the corner, walking faster now, almost breaking into a jog. She needed to find somewhere safe, somewhere to think, but the deeper she went into the mansion, the more twisted and unfamiliar the layout became. As she passed another door, a creak made her freeze. Someone had just entered the hallway behind her. She could feel it, the presence of someone there, too close, too quiet. It was a strange feeling, like she wasn't being followed in the conventional sense, but rather like someone was making sure she didn't escape. Her breath caught in her throat as she spun around, her eyes scanning the corridor. Nothing. The hallway was empty, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her footsteps faltered. A cold sweat began to bead on her forehead. What was she even doing here? Why was she still looking for answers, when everything around her felt like it was closing in? But before she could rationalize the fear creeping up her spine, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She fumbled for it, her hands trembling as she pulled it out, trying to steady herself. The screen flashed with an unknown number. Her stomach turned. Who was calling her at a time like this? The urgency in her veins screamed that something wasn't right. She answered, her voice shaky. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was cold, detached, and far too familiar. It was Richard. Emily stood frozen in the hallway, the weight of Grace's ultimatum pressing down on her like 1,000 pounds. Trust her. How could she? After everything that had happened, after all the lies, how could she possibly trust Grace, who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes the entire time? But what if there was no other choice? What if Grace really was the only person who could protect her? The walls felt like they were closing in, and with every passing second, Emily could feel the net tightening around her, the danger intensifying. But trusting Grace didn't feel like an answer. It felt like a death sentence. Her mind was in turmoil, her heart pulled in every direction, and the uncertainty was gnawing at her insides. The air in the mansion seemed to grow thicker with every second that passed, the silence punctuated only by the pounding of Emily's heart. She stood in the middle of the grand hallway, the weight of Richard's words hanging heavily in the air, as his eyes bore into hers with a look she couldn't quite read, part desperation, part warning. She had trusted him. She had trusted him more than anyone, and now she was caught in a storm of confusion, betrayal, and danger. Everything was spiraling out of control, faster than she could process. Grace had made her choice clear: either trust her and walk away from this twisted mess, or keep pushing forward, knowing that the truth would come at a cost. But Richard's sudden appearance, his presence now in this darkened hallway, only added more fuel to the fire that was rapidly consuming Emily's world. "Emily, you have to listen to me," Richard's voice broke through her swirling thoughts. He stepped closer, his face etched with a mix of guilt and something darker, something she hadn't seen before. "I never wanted this to get so out of hand. But it's bigger than you think. Bigger than any of us." The words hit Emily like a slap to the face. Bigger than any of us? What was he talking about? She had thought this whole nightmare revolved around the gala, the key, the messages, the cryptic threats, but now, Richard was telling her something different. Her chest tightened as fear gripped her, the unsettling feeling growing stronger with every word that left his mouth. "Do you remember when you first got that message?" Richard asked, his voice low, almost too careful. "You thought it was just some sick joke. A game. But it wasn't. This is a much bigger operation. And you're not the only one involved. None of us are." The ground beneath her felt like it was shifting. Emily shook her head, trying to understand, trying to piece together what Richard was saying, but it didn't make sense. "What do you mean, bigger? Who's behind this? Who else is involved?" Richard's eyes flickered nervously. For the first time, Emily saw real fear in them. "There are more people. People you don't even know about. People I didn't even know about until recently." His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "And the truth is, it's not just a game. It's about control. Power. There are forces at play here that go far beyond us, beyond the gala, beyond anything you can imagine. And you're in the middle of it now. There's no going back." Emily's stomach churned as his words began to sink in, but before she could respond, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. She turned, heart racing, and saw Grace stepping forward, her expression unreadable, her movements deliberate. But this time, something was different. There was no cold calculation in her eyes now, there was something else, something darker. Something that made Emily's pulse spike with fear. "Richard's right, you know," Grace said, her voice dripping with icy certainty. "You've been playing with fire, and now it's too late. You think you're uncovering the truth. But the truth is, you're a pawn in a game far bigger than you can comprehend." Emily's breath caught in her throat. A pawn? Was that all she was in this twisted web? Every instinct screamed at her to run, to leave, but there was nowhere to go. There were too many secrets, too many lies, and every corner she turned only led to more betrayal. Richard's face tightened. He glanced at Grace, then back at Emily, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's right. They've been pulling the strings all along. We never had control. None of us. Not Leo. Not me. Not even you." Emily's mind was reeling. This couldn't be happening. She had trusted Richard. She had trusted Leo. She had trusted Grace. But now, it felt as though the very foundation of everything had shattered. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. This was a conspiracy, and it was everywhere. There was no escaping it, no matter what she did. Before Emily could fully grasp the magnitude of what was happening, Grace moved with a speed that shocked her. In an instant, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. It wasn't just any envelope, though. It was sealed with a wax stamp, an old, intricate design Emily didn't recognize. "Take this," Grace said, holding it out to her. "This is the final piece. The one you've been searching for. Everything you need to understand why you're here. Why all of this is happening." Emily stared at the envelope, her instincts screaming not to take it. But what choice did she have? She reached for it, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the cold wax. As soon as her hand made contact with the envelope, a sharp pain shot through her chest, as if the very act of accepting it had triggered something deep inside her. A warning. A signal that she was in too deep. But it was too late. The moment her fingers closed around the envelope, everything changed. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in around her, and the room went dark. The lights flickered, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, Emily thought she might have imagined it. But no. The world around her was shifting, warping into something unrecognizable. The air was thick with tension, with the promise of something sinister lurking just beyond the surface. And then it hit her. The realization. The true scope of the conspiracy was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about the gala, or even the key. It was about control. Power. And it wasn't just Grace or Richard or Leo pulling the strings. The entire system was rigged, and the ones who controlled it were far more powerful than Emily could ever hope to challenge. Her thoughts raced as the truth sunk in like a hammer to the skull. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something far bigger. And Emily. She was standing at the center of it, more exposed than she ever realized. The envelope. The message. It was all part of the plan. But what was the plan? Who was behind it all? And why had they chosen her? As she stood in the flickering shadows, clutching the envelope that seemed to burn a hole in her hands, Emily's mind went blank. There were no answers, no easy choices left. Everything she thought she knew was a lie, and now, she had no idea who to trust. The stakes had risen beyond anything she could have imagined. And as she looked from Richard to Grace, the crushing weight of it all settled into her chest. It was no longer just about getting answers. It was about survival. And that meant making a choice she might not survive. The clock was ticking, the mansion was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that pressed against Emily's ears, made her skin prickle with the weight of it. She stood in the center of the sprawling, dimly lit foyer, the envelope still clutched tightly in her hand, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. Everything she had uncovered, every clue, every warning from Grace, Richard, and even Alex, had led to this moment. It was all about to come crashing down on her, and for the first time, she felt the crushing weight of what she had gotten herself into. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the moment she had been dreading. The confrontation. The moment the final pieces of the puzzle would snap into place, and the truth would be revealed. And yet, there was a part of her that wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth. What if, in the end, there was no going back? What if the conspiracy she had been chasing was bigger than her, bigger than anything she could ever hope to understand? Her eyes flicked toward the stairway that led up to the second floor. The shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, as if something was lurking just beyond the reach of the dim light. The tension in the air was suffocating. Grace had been watching her, waiting for this moment, but Emily wasn't going to let her control the narrative any longer. She wasn't going to be a pawn in anyone's game. Not now. Not ever again. With every step she took toward the staircase, her mind raced. Was she truly alone in this fight? Richard's words echoed in her mind. It's bigger than you think. Bigger than any of us. And the more she thought about it, the more her chest tightened. Grace was part of something so much larger than a simple gala. The clues had pointed to this all along, the shadowy figures, the cryptic messages, the sealed envelope. It was never just about the gala. It had always been about control. Power. She reached the top of the stairs, the silence now so heavy it felt like a tangible force pressing on her chest. Every footstep echoed in the vast emptiness, each one a reminder that she was walking into a trap she had been carefully led into, step by step, without even realizing it. She had been manipulated. Played. As she rounded the corner to the long hallway, her pulse quickened. There, at the end of the hall, stood Grace. She was waiting for her, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips, as though she knew something Emily didn't. The smile was cold, distant, and for a split second, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Grace had been expecting her to come to this moment, that she'd known all along how it would unfold. You really think you have all the pieces, don't you, Emily? Grace's voice was like ice, sharp and mocking. But you're wrong. You've never had the full picture. You've been chasing shadows. Emily's eyes narrowed, the envelope now burning a hole in her hand. She had come too far to back down now. I know more than you think, Grace. And I know you're not who you say you are. Grace chuckled, the sound of it dripping with amusement. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. But you still don't understand. You've been part of this from the start. From the very beginning. Something in Emily snapped at that. I didn't choose this. You pulled me into this, she shouted, her voice cracking with frustration and fear. You and everyone else have been using me. It's all been a lie, a game. I don't know who to trust anymore, but I know one thing. You've been lying this entire time. Grace's smile faded, and for the first time, Emily saw something in her eyes, something dark, something more than just the cold calculation. It was almost like pity. And it terrified Emily. You still don't get it, Grace whispered, her voice softening. This is bigger than your little investigation. This is about control over the ones who think they're untouchable. Over the ones who think they're safe. She took a step closer to Emily, and the air between them seemed to crackle with a sudden, electrifying tension. You were never meant to uncover the truth. You were meant to play your part. The weight of her words settled like a stone in Emily's stomach. It hit her, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. All of it. The messages, the gala, the secrets, the lies. She hadn't been chasing the truth at all. She had been chasing an illusion. A carefully constructed illusion to keep her distracted while the real game played out behind the scenes. You're just a tool, Grace continued, her voice low and calculating. Just like everyone else in this house. Just like Richard. Just like Leo. All of you, pawns. The truth isn't something you're meant to find. It's something you're meant to believe. Before Emily could respond, the door at the end of the hallway creaked open, and a figure stepped out from the shadows. Her heart lurched in her chest as she saw him, Richard. But this wasn't the Richard she had trusted. This wasn't the man who had promised to help her. This wasn't even the man who had tried to warn her. This was someone else entirely. His eyes were cold, calculating, as he looked at her with no trace of emotion. He stepped closer, joining Grace at the end of the hall. Richard, Emily whispered, the shock clear in her voice. No. You were working with them? Richard's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. You're smarter than you look, Emily. But you still don't get it. We were never on opposite sides. You were never meant to find the truth. You were just a distraction. The words hit her like a slap. A betrayal. Richard had been playing her, the entire time. It wasn't just Grace. It was him, too. He had been feeding her lies, pulling the strings while she danced blindly to his tune. And now it was too late. She was trapped. Do you want to know the real story? Grace's voice broke through her shock. It's not about who wins or loses. It's about who controls the game. And Emily, you never had control. Not once. Before she could react, Richard stepped forward, pulling something from his coat pocket. Emily's heart skipped a beat when she saw what it was, the same key she had been chasing all along. The one that had been linked to the gala, to the messages, to everything. This is the key to the future, Emily, Richard said, his voice hard, unrecognizable. And now you're part of it. Whether you want to be or not. With a flash, everything clicked. The key wasn't a physical object at all, it was the key to a new order, a new system of power, a system where people like Richard and Grace held all the strings. And Emily had been their pawn from the start. She didn't have time to think. The room seemed to spin, the walls closing in on her. But in that split second, Emily made a choice. She wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. She wasn't going to let this end with her losing everything. In a rush of adrenaline, she ripped the envelope open, tearing through the last shred of the conspiracy's web. Inside was a single photograph, a photo of Grace, Richard, and someone else, someone Emily recognized from the gala. But it wasn't just a photo. It was a threat, a reminder of everything they had done. The photograph was a map, a blueprint of their plans. And it was a trap. The walls of the mansion shook as Emily's world tilted. Richard reached for her, but before he could grab her, the floor beneath them erupted, the mansion's walls groaning and cracking under the weight of the final blow. And in that moment, as the entire world came crashing down around her, Emily realized that the real game wasn't about control anymore. It was about survival. And she was done being played. The dust had barely settled when Emily stumbled out of the wreckage, the remnants of the mansion's grand structure looming behind her like a haunting reminder of everything that had unfolded. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and broken dreams, and the only sound was the distant crackling of the fire that still burned in the ruins. She was alive, but the cost had been immeasurable. The game was over. Or at least, that's what she kept telling herself, even as her mind raced, replaying the moments that had led her here to this twisted, painful conclusion. Her body ached from the battle, but it was the weight of the truth that hurt the most. Richard and Grace were gone. Their betrayal had shattered her world, but she had emerged from the ashes of that collapse, stronger, sharper. The conspiracy they'd built was crumbling, its foundation fractured beyond repair. The key, the Gala, the messages, it had all been part of a much darker plan. But in the end, it was Emily who had taken control of the story, who had refused to play the part they had written for her. She had fought her way out, exposing the lies, the manipulation, and the power-hungry figures who had tried to break her. And in that final moment of destruction, when everything seemed to fall apart, Emily realized something deep in her chest. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was free. As she stood there, on the outskirts of the burning ruins, the weight of the past few days began to lift off her shoulders. The questions she had spent so much time chasing, the messages, the cryptic warnings, the shadowy figures who had whispered in the dark, they were no longer the things that defined her. The truth, she had come to understand, was something far more personal than any of those tangled threads. It was about reclaiming her life, her choices, her freedom. But even in the aftermath of this chaos, she couldn't escape the lingering feeling that not everything had been revealed. Not everything had been exposed. There was still so much more at play, so many loose ends that weren't fully tied up. She looked at the photograph she had kept, the one that had shown her what Richard and Grace were really a part of. It was burned into her memory, an image of a plan so vast, so complex, that it threatened to swallow everything. The photograph had been the map, the blueprint to their downfall, but there was something in it that still gnawed at her. Someone in the background, someone she hadn't recognized, had been pulling the strings from the start. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that the people she had uncovered were only the surface. The true masterminds were still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next move in their game. But Emily knew, deep down, that whatever came next, whatever mysteries remained, she was ready for it. Because this time, she wouldn't be fooled. She wouldn't be led into a trap. She would be the one setting the rules. She had seen how dangerous power could be, how quickly trust could be shattered. But in that same breath, she had learned how to trust herself. How to use the lessons from this nightmare to push forward and never look back. As the sun began to set over the wreckage of the mansion, Emily stood tall, her heart still racing, her mind still reeling from the truth. But she was no longer a victim of the game. She was a player, and the world was her board. The conspiracy had been exposed, but the story didn't end here. It never did. Somewhere, in the distance, she could still feel the eyes of those who had orchestrated everything, watching her from afar. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. She didn't know who was left, who was still playing the game in the dark corners of the world, but she knew one thing for certain: there would always be more secrets to uncover. There would always be more to fight for. And whatever came next, Emily would be ready. She would be the one to write the next chapter, and this time, no one would be able to manipulate her story. As the final embers of the fire crackled behind her, Emily turned away, her gaze fixed on the horizon, the promise of the unknown stretching out before her. The mystery had been solved, but the journey was far from over. The truth had set her free, but there was always another mystery, another chapter, just beyond the horizon. And she would chase it, no matter where it led. The truth she thought she was seeking was slipping further away, out of her grasp. Everything had become a dangerous game of trust and manipulation, with her caught in the center. Alex's message flashed again on her phone, this time more urgent, as if he knew she was reaching a breaking point. "Emily, they're trying to corner you. Do not trust anyone, not even me. They want you to make a mistake." Don't make it. Her breath hitched. What was he saying? Was he warning her to run away? Or was it something darker? The fear gnawed at her, sinking its claws deeper into her chest. Who could she trust? Was it possible that Alex was telling the truth, or was he another piece of the puzzle? Was the message a final attempt to keep her from the truth, or was it an honest warning? And if Grace's words were true, if she was the only one who could keep Emily safe, what was the price of that safety? The tension in the hallway was unbearable, every breath feeling like it might be her last, every second stretching out into eternity. And just when Emily thought she couldn't take it anymore, a new voice pierced the silence. A voice she recognized, but never expected to hear. It was Richard. "Emily," he said, stepping out from the shadows, his face tired but determined. "You need to listen to me. I never wanted you to get involved in this. But you're already too far in. And you have to choose. Right now. Trust Grace, or trust me. But you can't have both." Emily's world spun, and she felt the ground beneath her feet crack open. It was Richard. Her heart raced, her mind screamed, but nothing made sense anymore. The walls were closing in, and all she had left were impossible choices. Every decision felt like it would be the wrong one. And the clock was ticking. The danger was real, and she was trapped in a nightmare with no way out. The truth. Or safety. Who was she supposed to trust? The weight of it all crushed down on her chest as she stood frozen, unable to decide, unable to move.